Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with your charismatic host and prominent safety expert, Dr. David Perodin. Be entertained and informed as the Safety Doc discusses both best and bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. The truth will keep you safe. Follow Dr. Perodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD.
This is Dr. David Perodin, and I want to thank you as we begin another journey into school and community safety. If you're looking for industrial safety expert, Appalachian State University professor Dr. Timothy Ludwig, please visit www.safety-doc.com. Again, that's Dr. Timothy Ludwig at www.safety-doc.com. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year from the Safety Doc, and welcome to Safety Doc Podcast number 56. The question, will it work? The Army and the Department of Homeland Security has teamed up to prepare teachers for active shooter situations by providing them with video games. So we'll talk about that during this segment. A little bit of a recap here on some recent events, and just wish everybody a happy 2018. And go Badgers! My alumni, Wisconsin Badgers, won the Orange Bowl, so congratulations to the Wisconsin Badgers football team. Some anecdotes. We are in the middle of a cold snap right now. So as I look up over at the Safety Doc North Star weather dial, we are at about 54 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's chilly down here. Actually, I have a fireplace in the corner, which I turn off when I do the show so I don't have background noise, so temp drops even more. So we've been in this nap for about 7 to 10 days. It'll go on another 7 to 10 days, meaning, temperatures hovering right around that zero mark, getting down to minus 10, minus 12. And then, of course, you have a wind chill added on top of that. It could be minus 20 and so forth. A good part of this, though, a good part is this deep freeze might kill off some of the Japanese beetles that hibernate in the soil. And last year, boy, my trees really took a beating from the Japanese beetles. My birch tree was pretty much devoured in a day. And they even went after my maple tree in the front, which is something, according to everything I looked on web searches, Japanese beetles don't munch on maple trees, or they munched on the one in my front yard. So hoping that this deep freeze kind of takes care of that population. I had an enjoyable and safe Christmas on the first trip we did was up on the first part of Christmas. We went to my family, my parents, and my family side, I guess. And when I go there, my dad assigns me the official role of being the photographer. So I need to bring along the tripod and use his camera, use my camera, use my phone camera, and then kind of compile some photos, some family photos, and that's right away. That's probably within 10 minutes. Everybody gets there, you put things away and whatever, and it's like, let's get the photos done. So my job. I got some good ones. Actually did order a new tripod off of Amazon.com and use Aaron Clary's affiliate link. So hopefully, Aaron, you got the commission off of that one. So yeah, fun time. Also did a little bit of a trick with my parents. I was cleaning out over this Christmas break and found a cigarette lighter. I don't smoke, but had a cigarette lighter, a few other things, but these little objects, left these up at my parents' house in inconspicuous places. So when they find these things, they'll be like, who was here that might have left a cigarette lighter? So that'll go through their mind, all innocuous stuff, kind of fun. So we went to my mother-in-law's for Christmas also. And her brother, my wife's brother, so my brother-in-law works as a geoengineer for Google. And we got into some invigorating discussions about artificial intelligence and singularity and topics like that. So had a fun time. And my brother-in-law, for his son, he bought him a small robot for Christmas. And they brought this robot along. It's really cool because it would recognize you by facial image. It would scan you, and then it would say, like, "Hello, David," and so, it would pick up things and whatever. Just kind of neat. It more or less a toy and a novelty, but just to give a glimpse that, it won't be that long, and we'll have things like that, which will be every day. So wow. I was working today, actually, with communications with producer Mark Zammit, and he is right now filming and producing the movie Homeless Ashes, about homeless youth in Great Britain. He is an actor, producer, director. If you go into the IMBD and you can kind of do a little bit of research on people who work in those areas, he has 32 credits to his name. I mean, very, very active as an actor, again, producer, director. We've been in contact throughout today, actually, and he'll be on the show, and he's going to talk about what he's experienced in his putting this documentary together about homelessness and how it impacts youth. And we're going to talk about that from like a safety perspective and just some of the things that he had observed, both directly and then kind of some behind the scenes things of safety and what he perceives as being some of the biggest safety factors. So I'm really excited about that. Again, producer Mark Zammit, Zammit, and you can find him on IMBD and soon listen to him on the Safety Doc podcast. So really excited. It's one of those things that's super cool about this job. I don't know if it's a job, hobby, public service, but I have met so many terrific people in 2017 through podcasting, from Hector Solis to Larry Roberts to Marianne West, to Mark Zammit and so forth. Many people who have just helped me become better at getting my message of safety across, and just helping me on the technical aspects, again, of podcasting, and just people you become friends with and regularly communicate with. So I want to send a thank you out to those folks and so many folks, again, in 2017 who have positively impacted me and impacted the Safety Doc podcast. Thank you so much. Great things for 2018. Really can't wait for the shows to start rolling out. So, today, let's talk about today. So, just a few days ago, the Army and the Department of Homeland Security announced that they were releasing cooperatively at no cost a computer-based simulation that trains teachers how to best respond in an active shooter situation at a school. Okay, so this just came out. Now, something was released from FEMA 2 years ago on December 20th, 2015, called, it was a class, it's a free course. Anybody can take it. Anybody, you could take it. You just go online, register with FEMA, and you can take a lot of FEMA courses that have to do with safety. People don't know that. Check it out. Just type in FEMA plus like free safety courses. And they have so many courses that cover a lot of things. And they're really well done. I found them to be very well done. I actually include one in a graduate course for aspiring pupil services, special education directors on instant command systems. But anyway, this course that came out in 2015 from FEMA, IS-907, Active Shooter, What You Can Do. So a lot of you probably never heard of that course, and a lot of people in schools, teachers, administrators, never heard of that course. So right now we have this announcement of the Department of Homeland Security and the Army jointly releasing. This will be actually coming out more or less in later spring at no cost, this computer-based simulation, which is, when you really get into it, at this level, it's kind of more a video game, like a very primitive Call of Duty type video game. But it was actually 2 years ago, like a very good resource came out, and I'm sure a lot of people just never knew it was out there and it wasn't utilized. So this is getting a little bit more of a spotlight on it. And I think because it is in a video game format, it's going to be more engaging. But again, there have been releases of trainings before that have come out of the government, which really like people just haven't been aware of. It's amazing because when I teach this college class, I'm working with people who are already teachers and sometimes administrators. And when I mention these FEMA courses, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So again, check that out because there's so many courses available for free from FEMA that you can use to just make yourself, your knowledge base deeper when it comes to aspects of just safety and incident command systems and whatever. It's endless. They're always adding things. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to read and comment about a short article from Fox News about this video game initiative from the Army and Department of Homeland Security. So I looked, and there's a lot of articles out there. They're all the same. They're ubiquitous. It's the same exact thing, almost word for word. No one has analyzed this. So no one's come in and said, like, this, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's, like, how this might fit with different things going on in society right now. What's happening is the news is disseminating this. They're not analyzing it. They're not critiquing it. So that's one, it's one thing to disseminate. Almost anybody can disseminate, that's, I'm going to raise this armrest a little bit. This is the thing where, again, I got the wonky armrest, like one is up, one is down, and still my shoulders seem off. I don't know. It's the craziness of the Safety Doc podcast studio, I guess. But yeah, so people, get into disseminating information and not critiquing information. So that was ironic because it would be like, this and there'd be 10 other newspaper headings. I'd go in and click and it was the same article, same exact article. So anyway, we're going to Fox News and I'm going to read the article in just a second. I'm going to give my reaction throughout the article. And I want to share when this initially came out, when this news came out, my first response was, ooh, like I wasn't that warm to this idea at all for a few reasons. But now, since some days have passed, I've kind of tempered that and have thought, okay, what are the positives of this? What are areas that are negatives? And then what's going to kind of be the unknown that'll have to be figured out? And I was able to then categorize that. So we'll get into that. It's going to be the good, the bad, and kind of the to be determined once we go through this article. So I'm going to read the article right now. Dun, 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 dun. This is the music that we play when we change to articles. All right, here we go. From Fox News, published December 27th, 2017. Okay, the U.S. Army and Department of Homeland Security have created a computer-based simulator that trains teachers on how best to react in an active shooter situation. So, okay, right there, what they've really done, like I've gone and I've seen the snippets of it and the little video clips and things like that. It's basically a video game. It is a very early version of a Call of Duty type game. So this thing where they're saying that it is a computer-based simulator, no, it's not VR. It's not like something that you climb into, like, they train pilots or anything like that. To say it's a computer-based simulator is kind of a stretch when really it's more or less a video game. So, but, I'm just pointing that out. Could it evolve to be something that's delivered through virtual reality and all? I'm sure it probably will and has that potential, but right now, it's really, when I worked out of high school, okay, I worked at the lumber mill a few blocks from my house. When the summer I got out of high school, earned some money before I went to school at fall. And my job was to put down basically sticks to layer out wood that would go into a kiln. So it was me and another guy, and we would do this, and that was it. And my job was called a lumber stacking technician. And all I did was put boards on top of boards to go into a kiln. So it's kind of this thing of sprucing this up a little bit. But anyway, let's go on. The $5.6 million program, it's called the Enhanced Dynamic Geosocial Environment, or EDGE, is similar to those used by the Army, in which a virtual environment helps train soldiers in combat tactics and scenarios. Okay? The program is expanding to schools to allow teachers and other school personnel to train for active shooters alongside first responders. Homeland Security officials said the school version should be ready for launch by spring. Okay, so this training alongside first responders, I don't quite get that. I didn't see that in any demos of the game. I don't know how that works. I don't know if like multiple people play at once and some of them are first responders that come in when I say play or participate in the game, or if suddenly like first responders show up while you're playing this game and you have to figure out how you're going to interact with them. I don't know. That's fuzzy to me. And I see that the thing is, you really need to plan for like the first 8 minutes of an active shooter situation. Most conclude in 8 to 15 minutes anyway. But, once police are on the scene, they're going to be actively trying to neutralize the shooter or shooters. So I don't quite understand that statement when it's like personnel to train for active shooters alongside first responders. So that's a little fuzzy to me. Again, I think that might be a little overreaching for the first release of this. But anyway, here's a quote. With teachers, they did not self-select into a role when they where they expect to have bullets flying near them, said Tamara Griffith, a chief engineer for the project. Unfortunately, this is another quote, it's becoming a reality. We want to teach teachers how to respond as first responders. Okay, so right there. The thing is, I guess who goes in, unless you're police or army, I don't know if you into a role where you're expecting bullets to be flying around you. I mean, if you're working in a shopping mall, music events, a grocery store, I mean, any place that shootings occur, which is everywhere, a church and things like that. So, places like that. That statement to me, where she says, with teachers, they do not self-select into a role. Well, then this should really be made available to everybody in the public. Unfortunately, it's becoming a reality. Well, it's always been there. And I think the number of school shootings, it depends on how you look at how those are reported. They can look like they're really high, or they can look like there hasn't been much change in the trend line. I mean, if you're looking at specific events where somebody comes in and they target one person, like over a dispute, boyfriend, girlfriend breakup or something like that, that's counted as a school shooting versus like what is a mass shooting. The mass shooting numbers certainly would be much lower. But again, I don't think, her statement here, we want to teach teachers how to respond as first responders, really kind of meets what this is trying to do. But the project manager, so this is someone who was an engineer on the project, but the project manager, his statement I really like. So here we go. Bob Walker, the project manager, Bob Walker, project manager, said the program was designed to put a teacher in a situation similar to an active shooter scenario. Each teacher will get 7 options on how to keep students safe, and some in the program might not respond or be too afraid to react. That in itself becomes another problem to be solved. Absolutely right. So what Bob is talking about here, not people not reacting, and this whole process of, when you are reacting, you're having to evaluate decisions or heuristics, and that all kind of boils down to situational awareness, being aware of what's happening around you, your context and your situation. So what he's saying is he's saying, hey, this is really made to teach 2 things. One is situational awareness, that you're much more aware of your environment at all times, which I believe I am, and hopefully because you've been listening and following the show, you're more aware of what's happening around you at all times, in all environments. And the other part of this is that if something does happen, which becomes a potential threat to your safety or the safety of others in your care, your family or, students or whatever, that you're able to make a decision and you don't freeze. Some people, another part of this that comes into question is discretion. Like what is the discretion afforded to people to make decisions? Some people won't make decisions. I've been in meetings where teachers have said, I won't decide to fight back unless I'm given permission, like right now, or I want it in writing, like in policy, that I have permission to fight back if somebody is, breaks into my room and I feel threatened or something like that. Yeah, that actually has happened. So, So it's situational awareness and also decision making, getting people to make a decision. That not making any decision is not an option. You have to make a decision. Rory Miller has several books out there, conflict communication books. If you do a search for him, and I like Rory's work. He also trains prison guards, and something he states is that it takes a while for prison guards to realize, like, if they've been attacked by a prisoner, several seconds can pass before they fully realize what's happening to them. They kind of freeze, and they skip through in their mind of their training and what to do and what not to do versus like just, reacting. And, a quick recognition of, okay, I am under attack. I need to respond. And so he talks about how to break out of that. And that's something, again, this project is doing. Bob Walker, the project manager, there's two things. One is teaching situational awareness, being aware. The second is, if something happens, to quickly evaluate the options that you have, go through your heuristics, and then make a decision. Okay. So he adds, once you hear the children, the screaming, it makes it very, very real. Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, again, this is a video game. I've played video games which have been ultra realistic. So whether that adds to this being real, this gets into that kind of philosophy, I think, which is a little bit off base, or a lot off base, when you get to schools that do these very theatrical drills, and kids are done up in blood and all of that, of like, this is going to be more effective. Well, we know that those are not more effective. Statistically, people aren't remembering more of those trainings, and they are resulting in trauma. So anyway, I'm going to move on just a little bit here yet. The program can have the shooter be either an adult or a child. And the other part he adds, which is right on, we have to worry about both children and adults being suspects. True. Like, you're not going to know who really is the shooter and who's not, and if there are other shooters involved. So that's something, when you think about active shooter, almost all these drills are designed so there's one shooter. Well, what if there's 3 or 4? And what, and you don't know that, and suddenly, student is involved in the shooting and quickly sheds the weapon and has his, regular school clothing on. And so you're not going to be able to identify this, I think, as easy as what people think. And he kind of points that out. And we've seen this happen, like at shopping mall shootings where suddenly multiple people pull out a gun, and it's like, initially somebody fires something. Well, now 10 people have out guns. Was one of them firing, or are they all just doing that for defense or whatever? So, all right. The designers of the program listened to real dispatch tapes from school shootings and talked to a mother of a child killed in the 2012 mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newton, Connecticut. That shooting left 20 children and 6 educators dead after gunman Adam Lanza opened fire in the school. So, I'm not sold on the fact that listening to dispatch tapes was a good way to get your information for this training. I think it would have been much better, and maybe they did this, but they referenced these dispatch tapes. I think if you go through the forensic analysis of Sandy Hook, for example, which is hundreds, if not thousands of pages. I mean, I've seen them online and physical diagram, documents. And here's something I learned, in my research about Custer's last stand at Little Bighorn. They went in and were able to, with metal detectors and different forensic tools, go in and find, match up gun bullet casings, and track movement across the battlefield, and basically lay things out in a very forensic type manner. So I don't think dispatch tapes, and I'm not sure what the value of that talking to mother would have been, because again, the event would have been concluded by the time the mother would have known. And I just see there's pieces of this I'm not sure. And again, they quote things, so people say things. This isn't a press release, unfortunately, from Homeland Security as much as it's some talking points, or I don't know. I don't quite gather this. I think this could have been released in a way that was much more coherent, maybe had some like specific bullet points or some statistics or something like that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a little sloppy the way this came out. So anyway, you know what? We are going to get into some reactions to that I pulled off the net. But before we do that, we're going to learn more about the Safety Doc podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Safety Doc podcast with the nation's leading safety expert, Dr. David Perodin. Author, radio show host, university instructor, researcher, expert witness, and consultant. Powerful testimonials. Dr. Perodin has a strong reputation as the go-to safety consultant, and he was still able to exceed our expectations. When we went looking for an expert in the field of crisis preparedness and prevention, David was the single person we pursued. Not easy stepping into the touchier subjects of life, but Dr. David pulls it off. Take a listen. Now, back to Dr. David Perodin and the Safety Doc podcast.
What in the hell was that all about?
And we are back. All right. So, a lot of comments in the different articles that were posted specific to this. So what I like to do is go through the comment section because you can get a pretty good feel for the reaction of the public. And there were basically kind of four themes that developed, and I pulled out some different comments, and I'm going to read those and dissect those a little bit more. So first comment: a couple of training sessions will only allow teachers to know what they should do, but not act. It takes daily training to allow one to enter into an active combat scenario and be expected to survive. So, there were a number of posts, kind of in this thread of saying, this one-time training isn't going to instantly convert these teachers over to having these combat type skills. That to say that you're taking a military program, which you train all the time in the military for military conflict, part of the job. So, and I have friends, for example, I agree with this person's statement and others similar to it, because I have friends who are police officers who say, Dave, we have to get out to the firing range at least every few weeks, and make sure that our skills are sharp. And I think they're tested 4 times a year, that they have to have a certain accuracy level. But they really say on their own they need to go out and do much more frequent than that. And also that they're drilling much more. So, yeah, this is one of those things where the question starts to pop up of this training, like if it's done once, is that sufficient? If it's done twice, 3 times, what's the frequency? Is it one person doing it? Does it turn into VR? Does it become multiple people doing it? I don't know. I go back to, I stated once in a previous podcast, the tabletop activities are terrific ways to train for crisis situations, including active shooter. And I believe they still have the upper hand over a training like this. Maybe a training like this, it has some value of being a tool in that, but I'm a little bit worried, again, that this could be something that a school latches onto and says, we've done this training, we've had everybody go through it. And then, it's kind of a one and done. So here's the second quote. When are they going to address the real problem and stop blaming firearms? So it wasn't identified really who the they was, except it's probably government, because it's Department of Homeland Security and the Army releasing this. Address the real problem, which is address the real problem, which I don't know what that is. I wish they would have explicitly said that. Is the real problem a lack of mental health? Is it poverty? Is it, government oppression? I don't know what this person's thinking, but There were a number of posts along this thread, though. A number of posts along this thread, and so I think I want to expand this and say I think the real problem or where this needs to go is we don't have a very good detection system for this, and yet we know time and time again for active shooter situations that the active shooter likely talked to somebody else or multiple people, not only days, but sometimes months ahead of time. There was a shooting in 1997 in Bethel, Alaska. I believe like 24 kids knew about it ahead of time, showed up at the school on a mezzanine waiting for it to happen. One kid brought a camera. Another kid or two even taught the kid carrying out the shooting how to use a gun, a shotgun, I believe, that he had gotten from like a relative. So how to load it and things like that. So anyway, people know. And I think we find this even in shootings, that are public shootings, whether they be at, church, whether it be going after a political figure, whatever it is, that there were signs out there. So we need to ramp up the detection systems, and also, so what are the signs to look for and how to report those? And there's no mention of that throughout this work at all. Or how this would couple with that. That's the other part of like, I would have liked to have seen in this article or some press release saying this is stage 1, or like this is how this will interface with a threat identification and training and reporting system or process or something like that. So that wasn't there. So let's get into number 3. So number 3, as far as a comment, and these are again excerpts that I pulled out. This one was in more than 50% of all of the posts, this theme. Okay, here we go. Firearms stand next in importance to the Constitution itself. They are the American people's liberty teeth and keystone under independence. From the hour the Pilgrims landed to the present-day events, occurrences, and tendencies prove that to ensure peace, security, and happiness, the rifle and pistol are equally indispensable. The very atmosphere of firearms everywhere restrains evil interference. They deserve a place of honor with all that is good. This is quoted from George Washington, although I don't know if this is an authentic quote from George Washington or not. So, but that was the majority. The majority of responses to this were specific to the Second Amendment, and specific to this is a step into, blaming firearms, that we're going to see a movement to get rid of firearms, limit firearms. And I'll say those responses were typically longer. Like this is a solid paragraph, and some were, 2 paragraphs. They were the longest responses that were generated by far. So you can get a feel for where the public is at. Even though, again, this article didn't touch on, we're going to take your guns away. I laugh for the fact that, if you even come close to that, you have a very strong response from Second Amendment supporters. And I'm not saying I'm pro Second Amendment or anti Second Amendment. I'm not saying that at all in any positionality in this. I'm just saying that I think people who write these articles are very, very aware of the language they use, because they know that if they get anywhere close into the Second Amendment, that is an issue that is immediately going to come up. So now, the other part of this, though, is I think people reading this, I didn't pull out of this at all a sense that, there was the statement of, yeah, this is happening more often, which is, probably a leading statement. But it really got a pretty strong, this is what I would expect if there was an article that came out of saying, here's someone or a congressional, group that is proposing a limitation or a ban on certain types of guns or the number of guns you can own. This is what I would expect for something like that. So let's get into the last one. This one is more of kind of a nihilistic view of the world, and there were a number of these type of posts too. I'm going to read this one. There are some things that exist solely to destroy anything that does not agree with it. There is evil in the truest form. The problem with this evil is that it does not passively exist. It actively consumes and will devour all that you cherish if it is not met with an appropriate force. There are evils that exist only to devour love, disrupt peace, and demolish all you hold dear. It will slash the other cheek that you turn. That reminds me of the movie The Dark Knight, part of the Batman trilogy, where I think, what was it, Alfred said, some men just want to see the world burn. So yeah, you kind of got into some deep philosophical statements of saying, you know what, if someone is determined, you can't stop them. They're going to find a way, and if you harden one target, like this specifically has to do with active shooter situations. Well, what if someone wants to take a vehicle and plow into kids on a sidewalk getting out of school? So, one thing over Christmas my brother and I talked about, he goes to a number of games at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, and he said just recently, he was talking about when he's crossing Lombardi Avenue, which is in front of the stadium, after a game. I mean, it's really busy, it's slow, and you have 80,000 people leaving the stadium. If there was somebody to, initiate an active shooter situation, he talked about the people he goes with. Of here's what I would do. Here's what I'm going to do if someone suddenly jumps out of a vehicle driving up and down Oneida Street, or Oneida crosses to, it's Oneida and Lombardi cross right by the stadium. Here's what I would do. Discussions he would have never had. And I went to games, in the 80s and 90s, with discussions we never had back then that you have to have now. So interesting statements that were coming out in the comments section. So now I'm going to get into the good, the bad, and the to be determined. But first, thank you so much for listening to the Safety Doc podcast. We get rid of the rhetoric. We get you the facts. We make you and your family safer.
Thank you for tuning in to the Safety Doc podcast with the nation's leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin, author, radio show host, university instructor, researcher, expert witness, and consultant. Powerful testimonials. Dr. Perrodin has a strong reputation as the go-to safety consultant, and he was still able to exceed our expectations. When we went looking for an expert in the field of crisis preparedness and prevention, David was the single person we pursued. Not easy stepping into the touchier subjects of life, but Dr. David pulls it off. Take a listen. Now, back to Dr. David Perrodin and the Safety Doc podcast.
What in the hell was that all about?
Da-da-da-da-dun, dun, dun, dun. The good. Okay, the good. From this, the good. Video games are actually a great way to learn. You can go back to my podcast number 18, Safety Doc Podcast 18, with University Professor Dr. Sean Dickers, an expert in multiplayer video games and using video games in the classroom, and video games just in general as a learning format, teaching tool. So we know that video games have been effective not only in schools, but in nursing homes and helping people increase their cognitive skills and decision-making, alertness. So we know that video games are a good way to approach learning. And it sounds like, this was done in a way that the games have all the approaches installed in them to lead you through your first steps in building upon those, and to gain your confidence and lead you into decision making and teach you awareness and sharpen your awareness skills. So anyway, to go to this platform, I think is a good move. I think is a good move because most of us have played video games. 97% of kids report they play video games every week. Kids are graduating and they're becoming the teachers, and I played video games. I'm 46. When I was in college, I dominated at Madden football. Dominated, except for the overtime game where I had the Washington Redskins. My roommate Nate had the Chicago Bears. I had 3 field goals blocked in overtime, and I lost. but I did return a couple games later to win the Saga Super Bowl 55, 48 on a fourth down conversion to Packers wide receiver Sterling Sharp. So anyway, video games are a great way to learn. So this is a good move. It's a good move into that. Number 2, this is a stepping stone to multi-person virtual reality trainings that can be calibrated for variables and injects. The system is not... So this system is only a first attempt. Okay, it's more of a primitive video game thing, but you could get this into kind of a multi-person virtual reality. That's very much out there right now. The VR systems where you wear the goggles and you could get to the point with this where you could start to do injects, where you could say, okay, like right now, it's like all the power is going to go out, or the fire alarm is going to sound, or something like that. So you could throw things like that in there. So I like that. I think that is going to be a natural progression of this. So that's good. Number 3, under the good, this will be free to schools. And I expect there's obviously going to be training materials that'll go with this. So that is great, because commercially, somebody could easily go to a district and say, listen, we'll come in, we'll bring all of the video game stuff and we will make this available for $5,000, and we will train all of your staff over an in-service day, and they'll all get to participate in this, and they'll get a certificate and all of that, and boom, one and done. We'll take care of everything for you. People just have to show up in this, these rooms, and we'll do it. So, which happens right now for other types of trainings, these high drama scenarios of, these semi-military type people coming in and doing these trainings, which are very expensive. And I'm not a believer in those trainings, because I just do not feel the research, the empirical evidence is there to support that those are any more effective than, for example, tabletop trainings or having a thorough discussion through these things. So anyway, it's free and it's provided by the government. If it is similar to the FEMA type trainings, I think they will be quality. So, the comprehensive training. Number 4, this doesn't have the unnecessary drill trauma that has become so common with theatrical school shooting multi-agency trainings, which have prompted litigation by staff and students, and also police departments. Police departments are backing out of these things now, saying, we're not going to participate in this, training where we have, where we come busting through the door and you have 5 people lying on the ground as if they've been shot, covered in fake blood, because of the risk of the exposure to litigation. We're not doing it. That's happening. So I think this is a way to throttle down from that. And the good, my point number 5, this will generalize, I believe, in time to mall workers, retail workers, churches, eventually grocery stores, things like that. It's going to be as common as like bloodborne pathogens. And if it's free, it might be something that every employer has their staff take on. What if it's retail, whatever. So I think this is good. It will spread it, and then more people will become aware. And again, we really have 2 things we want to get out of this, which is increasing situational awareness and increasing decision making. When I say that, meaning like you're making decisions faster, you're going through your options faster, and you're making your decisions based upon your context and your situation, not freezing. So the bad. Here's the bad. All right, I've got 5 things under the bad. Number 1, most school shooters told someone or made some social media post days or months ahead of time. So we need to focus on improving threat detection and threat input systems. And that by doing that will have a powerful impact on preventing school shootings. So this is reactive, and it's missing out on this opportunity in the Army. The Army does this, of course, in the Department of Homeland Security, of surveillance and the signs that they look for. But again, we need a training to come out, which is how to identify threats and how to report those threats and look at our user input systems. Like I've always said, school user input systems, some of them are just like tell a teacher, tell an adult, and the other ones, a number of them have language, vocabulary, vernacular, register, whatever, which is just, it's too high. I mean, it's written at a university level and not at a school age level. So number 2 in the bad. Using dispatch recordings to construct the scenarios is incomplete. Okay, so there also aren't many options, and no schools are similar in physical layout. So in this game, I think that you have like big school, little school. I mean, it's not like you can go through 50 school settings. You're going to have a different layout, like your school A, B, C, D, and they're all going to have different layouts. You will never have your school layout in there. I mean, eventually you could get to a point where, through VR and 3D, you could go down and have your own hallways put in and stuff like that. It's probably down the road, but right now it's basically like big school, little school. So it's not that customizable. And all school staff are different. The discretion afforded staff, the philosophy of a principal. So all those things are going to really impact safety reaction. And then the other trainings that staff have had and how, familiar they are with, instant command system structure. If they've had trainings in student mental health, first aid, maybe they can identify symptoms earlier. So there are a lot of factors that go into making a very robust, complete safety system versus just saying, and some schools might do this, of saying this is out, it's free, it's from the government, we want everybody to take it. This is our safety training for active shooter. And I can guarantee there will be some schools that will do that. So number 3, I couldn't discern the opportunity for the participant to ask questions. For example, somebody playing one of these using one of these video game scenarios. So they're engaged in it, they get done. And then if you have a question like, what do I do if I get caught in the hallway between classrooms and this person comes breaking in through the door into the school? Or like, you're not going to get an answer through this. Like, I didn't hear the PA announcement for an all school lockdown. That'll never be a part of this. Okay. So those are questions that you need to have a forum for those to come forward. So that's why you do regular drills and you have questions immediately after the drill, and you require teachers, like this has to be, here's like 5 questions about the drill. Like, where were you when it happened? Did you hear the announcement of that? Did your students understand? Did they have any questions? You're asking them. Were you behind a locked door? Was one in, proximal to you? And I mean, you can go down and you can identify these things, but this is one of these things which you would never capture if your PA system, people don't even know of the drill. And how many times does that happen? Every school I've worked with, it happens somewhere where someone's like, I was in this corner of the building at this time and I didn't hear it, or like it didn't come over my phone, or like this, I can't hear it because it's in the speaker in the hallway. And so whatever, that doesn't come through. So you need ways to have input. People ask questions basically compared to just giving them this training that they go through. You have to be able to ask questions and have those clarified. Number 4, what about a vehicle revving down a packed sidewalk? So again, this is linear. This is saying a training for an active shooter. So you're going to get people thinking that way, and it's going to be like one active shooter. But again, we know there's a trend right now toward using vehicles. So that's out there. This is where you really have to change your emphasis on this. I think what was it, Bob Walker, the project manager, whatever, said, kind of more into situational awareness where this generalizes out. But again, or what if it's at a bus stop or something like that? So I think you get very narrow into things like this. So that'd be the bad. And the bad, number 5, the majority of commenters are strongly arguing that this initiative is a threat to the Second Amendment. So we see a loss of focus on the intended purposes of this training, of this video game, which is, 1, situational awareness, increasing situational awareness, and number 2, accelerating contemplation of heuristics or your options, making decisions. So and I think maybe overtly at that point, and I don't know if anybody goes in and reads the comment sections of these things. I really don't. Who puts these articles out in the Army and Department of Homeland Security. But I think you have to be pretty explicit in anticipating this, and then also saying this does not mean that we are, saying anything about a school district or states or county or whatever, right to pass legislation or protocol or policy that someone can carry a gun if there's, hey, we're not getting into that, with this. We are getting into situational awareness and reaction as it has to do with active shooter situations. And maybe even the part of this that I would have changed, I think, instead of using active shooter, I probably would have used intruder, because you would respond the same way if it was an intruder situation. Somebody breaks in to a building, and let's say it's a custody issue, and someone's just, out of control, angry, and come in, and they come in. You don't know if they have a weapon, if they haven't presented a weapon, and how you would respond to that. So I think you need, because right now the people who have posted those comments, the 50% of people who had posted the comments were at Second Amendment, they're against this, and they've tuned this out. This is a step. This is infringement. This is a step onto sacred soil, and you need to get those people back, either at least aware and educated, and maybe some of them on board with what you're trying to do here. So I think that's important. So number 3 here is to be determined. So time will tell on these things. One is, okay, so we know that drill fatigue is a real phenomenon, and drills are often perceived as a novelty by staff and students. After you do your 3, 4, 5 fire drills, it's like, oh, it's a fire drill, and we'll go. This is from my research. In my doctoral dissertation, I found studies that prove this, and it was in Amanda Ripley's book about the evacuation of the Twin Towers during the 9/11 attacks, where a number of people on floors would, they didn't go to their evacuation sites, which were by the stairwells. They stayed at their desk, because it's like, we have the drill, it sounds, and we know 4 minutes later they'll give the all clear, so we're just going to stay where they're at. And then whoever was in charge of that floor to make sure that people got out to the area by the steps, they didn't enforce it after a while, because it was an inconvenience to everybody. So it's just kind of walking around and checking, and okay, if this was real, here's what we do. So it's one of those things too, where I think because it's a video game, it could be perceived as a novelty. And again, people have probably done stuff like this if a lot of people are into gaming, and if you're into, again, I'm just saying and I'm saying Call of Duty is bad. I'm just saying, because I know Call of Duty is a game, of course, where you have to exercise situational awareness, and it is a combat type game that involves being very aware of your environment, and that you could be shot, and others around you could be shot. So it's not like this is going to be new to anybody who's gaming. And again, it's one of those things that if you don't couple it appropriately with dialogue and a preface, it's not really going to have much effect. And if it becomes a novelty, then it really loses its power. So number 2, as the to be determined, there is a risk that this could be perceived as an all-inclusive training when it is only a tool to really help sharpen situational awareness and force people to make decisions. So that's the thing too, is will schools latch onto this, some schools, and say, wow, this is free, this is better than what we've had, so we're going to have people go through this, and this will be the training. When again, this really doesn't lay itself out to be like the all-inclusive training. You need to know your local practices, your own building. There's so many factors that go into an all-inclusive active shooter or intruder training versus just this. So point number 3, I have little idea on how this will be used for interagency training exercises. I said that during the article. I don't know. And I think it's better to take a class like from FEMA. You can do a free class. You can have people do it together. It takes like 2-3 hours, professional development. They have instant command system class, just so people know. And also have law enforcement come in and have that discussion of like, here's, for example, one of the best things was when law enforcement came in to a school I was working at and said, if you come out into the hallway running toward us, if there's an active shooter situation, and you say, hey, like I've got a classroom of kids, or like the person went that way and you come out, running in the hallway, the police are probably throwing you up against the wall because they don't know if you are involved in this as the shooter or not. So, those are the types of discussions that really need to happen. So I don't know how this will fit into interagency, and that puzzles me. So number 4, will we see increased focus on threat identification and threat reporting systems? I don't know. I think we should. But again, if that doesn't happen and this happens, we've just increased resources and a spotlight on a reactive measure versus a proactive measure, which is identifying the threats and reporting the threats. So I hope we see that develop and couple into this. Number 5, as this evolves to full virtual reality, how will VR sets be funded? I mean, some schools are going to be able to afford it and some aren't. So let's just face it. And is this where the haves and the have-nots? The schools that have the resources will be able to fund it. The ones that don't. Or will this be something where they'll be housed in a centralized location? Some school, there's like a cooperative educational service agency that has so many schools that's responsible for, Department of Ed in that school, in that state, and then these systems rotate from school to school. I don't know how that works. So that'll be interesting to see. I want to wrap things up here by saying thank you so much for a wonderful 2017. I've enjoyed the feedback. Please feel free to follow me I encourage you to follow me on Twitter @SafetyPhD, @SafetyPhD. Check out the website, safetyphd.com, safetyphd.com. And again, the podcasts are all out there on Podbean. Really enjoying Podbean. Everything is on YouTube. And if you have any questions, please contact me directly. You have my email information on the website, and I'd be glad to respond to you, post in the comment threads and so forth. Thank you. Let's keep the rhetoric out of safety. Keep yourself safe in 2018. And I'm just looking for this cold spell to end because my hands are dry. There's no moisture. There's like zero humidity left in the house. So we need it to get warm, which is 20 degrees right now. That is what we are classifying as warm. So take care, everybody, and thank you again for listening to this episode of the Safety Doc Podcast, episode 56 of the show. And our title here, Will It Work? Army and Department of Homeland Security Prep Teachers for Active Shooters with Video Games. Thank you so much.